که این عفو امیرالمؤمنین استفاده بکنن. هیچ تخصیصی وجود نداره. جنرال، وزیر، رئیس پارلمان، رئیس مصالحه ملی، وزیر، هر کسی که باشه بیایم به دروازه های باز امارت اسلامی با هم متحد شویم، یک کشور آباد بسازیم، دیگر در کنج و کنار افغانستان و توسط پول و پیسه و دشمنی نظام و پای ساخته شویم. نعره تکبیر! الله اکبر!
بیا خاص که ډېر د خوشحالۍ احساس موږ چې کولو هغه شپه کله چې وروستی امریکایي له کابل نه ووته. نو خدای پاک دې وکړي چې دلته نور صلح، امنیت او ارامي راشي او جګړې او بدبختۍ دغه له منځه لاړ شي، ځکه افغانان د 40 کاله ډېر ودردېدل، ډېر وځورېدل، ډېر ستونزو سره مخ شول.
These faces, we did not want to see them. We did not want to listen to their words, and this Afghanistan that was built by the West collapsed like a house of cards. 20 years of war, $2.3 trillion spent by the United States, more than 176,000 dead.
When you sum the human cost of this, it can only be described as a tragedy. There are plenty of lessons to learn. The question is, are we actually going to do the learning?
La question c'est, est-ce que les soldats français qui ont combattu en Afghanistan, ceux qui sont morts, ceux qui ont été blessés, est-ce que ce fut un combat pour rien? C'est ça la question.
On August 15, 2021, the Taliban regained power in Afghanistan. Coming out of hiding, the younger ones discovered their capital, Kabul. The veterans went back to their old homes and command posts. To really understand this return, we need to unlock some memories, to look back at the Taliban's origins 30 years earlier.
علت و سبب یک جا شدن ما در همراه طالبان وطن ناآرامی بود، جنگای داخل در بینشان شروع بود. با ما وقت میسر نمیشد که اونجا بریم زندگی آرام کنیم، چون که مشکلات ها خیلی زیاد بود. اونجا احساس امنیت نبود.
Faced with this violence, the West looked the other way. Yet some images do exist, obtained by a few intrepid journalists. The year was 1992. Factions were killing each other in the struggle for power. These men had been heroes, armed by the United States to defeat the Soviet invaders. But now, unable to see eye to eye after the liberation, they were wreaking havoc in the capital.
I was born in Kabul. I was deeply, deeply, deeply hurt. I can still feel that memory. It was a ghost town. After 4 o'clock in the afternoon, dogs were roaming, dogs who were used to eat human bodies, flesh. People were walking like ghosts, walking skeletons. You could see very little life in their eyes or in their features.
2 years of killing aren't easily forgotten. The leaders' names were Ahmad Shah Massoud, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, Abdul Rashid Dostom, Ismail Khan, Abdul Rasul Sayaf. Whether they were commanders, religious or party leaders, or tribal chiefs, they all, with good reason, became known as the Warlords. Women became spoils of war.
اختطاف و تجاوز و ازدواج اجباری اینا بی‌نهایت زیاد بود. نوید شهیدم دمکرارویان بود، ما دمکرارویان سیم بودم و هم دمکرارویان سی بود. وقتی که یک گروپ رفتن که تجاوز کنن این امرای خود ببرن، ما از مادر کلانش امر کرد که خود از تراس بردیم. و این دختر از 6 منزل از تراس خود انداخت و یک مدت طولانی حتی 2 شب و 2 روز در سر سرک ماند، کس جرأت برداشتن از او را نمیکرد از ترس. یک تعداد زیاد دخترای ما، حتی یک نسل ما گفتم میتونم قربانی این خشونت ها شدن.
In the south of Afghanistan, a myriad minor chiefs, all now forgotten, flattened Kandahar and its surrounding region. From this chaos, the Taliban were born. Now, in 1994, they left their Quranic schools to re-establish order and the rule of law. These early images give an inadequate impression of the scale of this movement. There are a great many Taliban. They rose up from the countryside and refugee camps in neighboring Pakistan, a legacy of the previous war.
زه تحصیل په دوران کې هم علم مې کاوه د خپلو استادانو مشرانو د خپل دا اقدام زموږ وشو، یعنې خپل د مظلوم ولس چې مظلومیت کې و مظلومیت ظلم دې هم ته ورسېده چې ناسته موږ ته نور په هېڅ قانون کې جواز نه درلوده. زموږ امیر المؤمنین رحمه الله ملا محمد عمر مجاهد رحمه الله د هغې په قیادت کې کنه موږ خپل دیني خپل مشغولتیا کوله.
The Taliban took over most of the country, and with it, they inherited a cumbersome guest, the Saudi Osama bin Laden and his jihadists from the 4 corners of the world. This is the forgotten story. The leader of the Al-Qaeda terrorist network wasn't welcomed into the country by the Taliban, but by the warlords in East Afghanistan before the Taliban took power. In 1996, the Taliban took the capital Kabul, and Al-Qaeda swore allegiance to them. They were saving the people from the warlords.
The people of this country were happy that they were gone. They were cleaned up by the Taliban for the right reasons. Not everything the Taliban did were bad. I will tell you this as an Afghan, as a human being. Not everything they did was bad.
جنگ از شهرها به دور رفت و طالب‌ها واقعیتش این بود که تجاوز، مخصوصا تجاوزات جنسی، ازدواج اجباری، اختطاف و اینی کارا از شانه زنها دور شد و صورت نمی گرفت. برعکس
The Taliban imposed an ultra-Puritan, moralistic new order which outraged the whole world. Women disappeared from sight, being excluded from public life, employment and education. In the West, we saw these images of oppression without understanding that they were the price for restoration of peace. It came as a brutal shock for city dwellers. After 15 years of communism and a civil war, they were now confronted with the strict Islam of their own compatriots.
The Taliban Islamic movement was a traditional people. They couldn't bring something new in this country. What they were talking about, the Islamic Sharia, Islamic law, existed in this country in more than 1,000 years because Afghanistan couldn't become the colony of any empire. So Afghanistan didn't experience any British law or French laws or Italian laws or any others.
The Taliban reigned in Afghanistan with an iron fist for 5 years. But then, everything was turned upside down on the other side of the world. On September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda jihadists attacked America on its own soil. America was blinded by sheer incomprehension and its desire for revenge.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda followers were in Afghanistan. The White House refused to negotiate with the Taliban. It deliberately linked the Afghan regime to the nebulous foreign terrorist organization, despite dissenting voices.
In the intelligence community, there was a lot of discussion at that initial moment. Should we target the Taliban? All right? And there were people at that time that said we should not, because the information we had was that yes, the Taliban played host to Al-Qaeda, but they really didn't know about 9/11. Not Afghanistan. There's not a single Afghan, not a single Taliban was in that terrorist act.
The United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These careful actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime.
In October 2001, America wanted to strike hard and fast. It did so by air, looking to destroy Al-Qaeda and the Taliban regime. But it did not commit its troops to fight in Afghanistan. For the boots on the ground, the CIA bought the Warlords, the very same ones who had torn the country apart 6 years earlier.
When the Americans showed up, you had these resentful warlords, okay? And when we said, we'll give you weapons, you can reconstitute your warlord armies, they instantly said, yes, we will do whatever you want. Just let us be warlords again.
The CIA called me and they said, this is going to bring a very bright future for Afghanistan. We are going to come there in a massive way to defeat the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. You are enemies. And they came. The biggest army in the world, the biggest economy in the world, comes to me and says, what shall I do? It's like all of a sudden, all of us become a Spider-Man. Right?
طالبان تنها از ولایات شمال و غرب افغانستان و مرکز افغانستان عقب نشینی کرده بود، به طرف جنوب و شرق و جنوب غرب وجود داشتند. قویی که بتواند طالبان تعقیب کنه و یا خلصلا کنه وجود نداشت. این برای مجاهدین در روز زمان خوشایند بود.
The warlords took back half of Afghanistan in under 2 months. They took their revenge on the Taliban under the auspices of the American soldiers. Far from the cameras and the public eye, thousands of prisoners were murdered. All that remains are these photographs taken at Dasht Al-Aili in a desert in the north. These Taliban were asphyxiated in containers in November 2001. Others were sent to secret prisons and Guantanamo Bay.
The justification for going into Afghanistan was 9/11. It wasn't about moral values. It wasn't about saving Afghan women. Afghan women had been persecuted for years and we did nothing. I was trying to have a friendly government. It's a system with which we're familiar. We did it extremely quickly.
The President of the United States.
In December 2001, a provisional Afghan government was formed, mandated by the United Nations. This was now 3 weeks after the taking of Kabul. The south of Afghanistan was still under Taliban control. In Washington, they were celebrating the partnership of the warlords and the Western powers.
America and Afghanistan are now allies against terror. We'll be partners in rebuilding that country. And this evening, we welcomed the distinguished interim leader of a liberated Afghanistan, Chairman Hamid Karzai.
Hamid Karzai, chosen by the United States, was from the Pashtun ethnic group in southern Afghanistan, like the Taliban. On the day of his appointment, he accepted their surrender. The next day, December 6, 2001, a Taliban spokesman gave a press conference.
Both sides, Hamid Karzai and Taliban authorities, agreed to surrender Kandahar for the welfare of people. Mullah Muhammad Umar agreed to surrender the power to them. They should try to save the life and the dignity of Mullah Muhammad Umar. We are ready to negotiate. We are ready to cooperate. We are ready to resolve this problem through logic way. But unfortunately, they were not listening.
So what happened? A day after, or a couple of days after, I don't know the exact sequence, Rumsfeld made a speech specifically abrogating that peace agreement.
I do not think there'll be a negotiated end to the situation that's unacceptable to the United States.
That's unacceptable. Okay, that's...
C'est ce que j'appelle, moi, la faute originelle. Mais ces gens-là contrôlaient 90% du territoire afghan. Où sont-ils allés? Ils n'ont signé de reddition à personne. Je crois aujourd'hui que si nous nous étions posé cette question sérieusement, la réponse aurait été que ces gens-là sont ici et qu'il faut leur parler, qu'ils représentent quelque chose et que peut-être ils pourront faire partie du consensus national.
A huge majority of the Taliban fled, seeking refuge in the rural areas or making their way to the sprawling refugee camps in neighboring countries.
او تولد مې چې دی په د مهاجرت په وخت کې کله چې په افغانستان باندې بیا حمله وسوله موږ هم لاړلو ډېر خلک لاړو بیا کله 4-5 کاله مخکې په پاکستان کې حالات سخت شول یعنی مهاجرینو باندې پابندي ولګېده شخصا موږ به یې ځورولو کله به چې ښار ته راتللو یو چک پاینټ باندې عادي پولیس موږ نه 200-300 روپۍ اخیستلې وو بغیر له دې نه په ښه سترګه نه راته کتل کېدل پاکستان کې
I, like most Americans at the time, I think, thought that the Taliban had been so thoroughly beaten, so quickly and easily overcome, and had fled so quickly that they were discredited and couldn't come back. Our priority then was Al-Qaeda.
"10,000 American soldiers and their allies hunted Al-Qaeda, which had vanished into the Afghan mountains. The White House chose this moment to invade the country. The United Nations approved the creation of the most hybrid military coalition in history. In 2002, 20 countries sent 5,000 soldiers to Kabul.
We're at a point where we clearly have moved from major combat activity to a period of stability and stabilization and reconstruction, and the bulk of this country today, it's secure. We see people returning to their country from all across the globe in large numbers.
Je suis revenue après 20 ans en Afghanistan. J'avais 28 ans exactement. On part de zéro, il y a tout à faire en Afghanistan. Tout est à reconstruire, le pays, les bâtiments, les routes, l'électricité, que ce soit l'éducation, la santé, et tout était à refaire, tout était à construire. Et très vite aussi, j'ai réalisé que les médias étaient à construire. En 2004, lorsque j'ai monté ma boîte de production, on a dû travailler sur les élections et la communication autour des élections. Donc, produire du contenu, des spots, télé, radio, pour convaincre les gens de participer aux élections.
هموطنان عزیز، من حامد کرزی کاندید ریاست جمهوری آینده افغانستان.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. این جانب دکتر مسعود جلال، کاندیدای ریاست جمهوری اسلامی افغانستان و من الله توفیق.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. اسم ما عبدالرشید دوستم است، یکی از کاندیدهای مستقل ریاست جمهوری آینده.
In 2004, the international community set up and financed the first fully democratic presidential election.
Tout à coup, c'est la première fois qu'on nous demandait notre avis pour élire notre président, notre leader. J'ai été accompagnée de mon grand-père, qui est un homme âgé de 90 ans, qui n'avait jamais participé à une élection de sa vie. Donc j'ai voulu partager ce moment avec lui. C'était d'autant plus émouvant de nous rendre à deux et de faire la queue et de voter. Et j'admets que j'ai pleuré. J'ai vraiment beaucoup pleuré le jour où j'ai mis mon bulletin dans l'urne. Et je suis sortie avec les yeux remplis de larmes, comme beaucoup de gens d'ailleurs.
که زر پانتون فارغ شدم بیام کار شروع کړم واځه مې خواغه کولو انګلیسي کې ډېر ښه وم نو کار شروع شو د خلکو لپاره ورځ $200 هغه د ترجمان هغه واید و دا ډېرې پیسې وې د هغه لپاره د خلکو د اقتصادي لحاظه ډېر زر هغه سول په وظیفو سول او کارونه زیات سول تر هغې پورې چې ترجماني کارونه و بیا ساختمانی کارونه شروع شول ورو پورو خلک په ساختمانی چارو باخت شول انجوگان راغله جامعه جهانی شعبات خلاص شول سفارتخانه خلاص شوی نو خلکو ته یو واره د کاري زمینه مساعد شوی هغه خلک چې مستعد ورته و هغه د زر په کارو ولګېدل
It was just a good time. It was a happy time. Like in our lifetime, it was always a dream to have a flag. So, you know, human beings, they need symbols, they need things that uplifts them, that gives them moral, that gives them encouragement. So yes, the flag, the national army, the national police, the women's colleges, the girls going to school, women's rights to work. There was hope and there was a bright future.
In the rural areas, however, development was slow coming. Then, as now, destitution reigned. All the inhabitants remember of this period are uniforms and weapons.
ولې نه بیریدلو پر موږ یې تکلیفونه تیر کړي وه پر موږ یې خوارۍ تېرې کړي وې نو ولې نه بیریدلو خفه وو نو خو تکلیفو ته موږ ولاړو خوارۍ ته موږ ولاړو ولې خوشحاله وو خفه وو موږ ته یې تاوانونه رسوله خو موږ ته یې تکلیفونه راکوله ډېر وخت کېږي لږ وخت نه کېږي.
In 2004, the Taliban chiefs made a last offer of surrender to President Hamid Karzai. They were ignored. And so, in the secrecy of the abandoned rural areas, in the refugee camps and in their rear base in Pakistan, they once again took up arms. In 2006, they allowed a few Western journalists to film their fighting.
په دوامه دوره کې چې موږ کوم مبارزه شوې ده کوم جهاد فی سبیل الله شوی هغه هم په موږ راتپل شوی جنګ دی موږ د چا کور ته نه یو تلي موږ باندې چا د خپلې خوارې و د خامه جونګړې نه دي دا هم چا موږ باندې پیرزو نه وي او دا زموږ مسلم حق و چې خپل د کور نه باید دفاع کړی وی خپل د مظلوم ولس نه باید دفاع کړی وی نو هغه الحمدلله وشول.
موږ سره د وسایلو کمی و اسباب موږ سره نه و او موږ سره نور مصارف نه برابرېدل خو چونکې یو عبادت په نیت موږ شروع کړی و د مادیاتو په نیت باندې موږ نه و او نه د سهولت په غم کې موږ و او نه بل څه نظر کې و.
یکی مردم از ما مردم شد ملت از طرفداری ما شد ملت هر نوع همکاری و امکانات با ما برابر میکردن تمام مهمات و سلاح و وسایل ما از طرف مردم تأمین میشد و بالاخره ولسوالی ها و قریه ها همه به دست ما مردم افتاد.
په طالبانو کې وه ولې نه بیرېدو خو په وینو مور سره ژړ بغارې و چې غارې مو ولې کوچنیان مو پرې مښتې و خو در کالو یې کشوله خو بابا چیرې نو دا یې زړه کېدله چې دوی بیا پلاره سي مور بیا زویه سي خور بیا وروره سي نو ولې نه ژړله پسې.
منګه دا جهاد چې شروع کړو نو په دې نیت موږ نو چې موږ به ژوندي پاتې کیږو نو موږ د شهادت په ځان منلی وو چې شهادت سړی په ځان ومني نو بیا یې هم سړي کې نور نه پاتې کیږي چې یې پکې سړي کې نه وي نو دا ټول کارونه بیا اسانه وي
The American soldiers were not prepared for guerrilla war.
Close it. Make sure it stays open so everybody else can get out. When you want to close it,
Fear changed sides.
there's a close button on the outside. If we're rolled, or if we're on our side for any reason, you got these openings right here. You can go out through the top or you can go out
I figured it was going to be a fairly easy mission. I figured it was settled, it was done. Essentially what we were doing there is just basically biding time until we could figure out a way to continue our effort against Al-Qaeda. That's what I thought. And the reality when I got on the ground was completely different. I'd come to find that there was still a shooting war in Afghanistan going on. And despite the White House portrayal otherwise, it was still a war going on.
The security situation in Afghanistan was declining. Taliban gains were extraordinarily worrisome. It began a very significant, noticeable decline in 2007. So there was no question, I think, that additional combat power from NATO and the United States would be necessary to reverse the Taliban momentum.
Taliban and Al-Qaeda are preparing to launch new attacks. Our strategy is not to be on the defense, but to go on the offense. The alliance was founded on this principle. An attack on one is an attack on all.
Vous venez de décider de renforts français en Afghanistan.
On va quand même pas laisser revenir ces moyenâgeux qui mettaient la burqa avec juste une petite fenêtre assez malheureuse.
Vous disiez il y a un an, pendant la campagne,
vous
disiez aucune armée étrangère dans toute l'histoire du monde n'a réussi à gagner une guerre.
Oui, sauf que c'est pas une guerre là, puisque nous sommes aux côtés des Afghans.
In just 2 years, the number of American and Western soldiers doubled. By 2008, there were 60,000 from 40 different countries. And the greater the number of soldiers deployed in Afghanistan, the harder the Taliban fought.
جنگ ساحه پراخه وه یقینا هغه جنګ هم چې و داسې اطرافي جنګ و فرانسویانو ته هم پکې ضربه او تلفات اوښتي وو موږ هره پېشقدمي چې وه موږ دپاره ډېر اهمیت ځکه درلودو چې موږ باندې هم ګزار کوو موږ هم پرې ګزار کوو چې موږ دښمن وو دا حقیقت دی.
The Taliban were more effective than I think people would have been led to believe. It's like, you know, these guys are reconstituting and they're being effective in a reconstitution. In most instances, the way we were trained, and my interpretation was they were a very close, intermeshed ally of Al-Qaeda. Essentially, they were nearly the same. I've come to find, in retrospect, that's not true. That the Taliban are much more akin to, if you will, the French resistance of World War II in many ways, because they are a regional entity. They consist of the Pashtun.
Today, 14 years later, the landscapes of southern Afghanistan are strewn with open wounds. Nothing was spared, not even the few schools. These are the scars of the battering suffered by the people caught in the crossfire of this power play.
و په دغه کمربند کې زحمت را باندې تېر کړی شان یې په لاس نه راکولول چې موږ وروسته چې شان دې په سر کې دي ستاسې کورونه بمبار شي ویستلو په زوره بیا د کورو ویستلو شان به مو اوار ور پاته سول هېڅ یې په لاس نه راکوئ پخ کړي دیګونه دسترخوان به مو ډک پاته سو ځینې وبه وتلو په زوره بیا د سرای ویستلو ول ووځئ چې سرای موږ ونیسي سرای به دوی ونیو هغه به تیارۍ رالې بمبار بیا پرې ورکړئ سرایونه به مو بمبار سول خود بیرېدلو نو خو چې د تیارۍ ګور به مو واورېدی زارې مو پر مځکه چاودلې ځغاستله به کوچنیان مومنان به چغې ولې ځغاستل به کور ته به په یو تاخچو کې پټېدله کښېنستله به چې تیاره به را د شپې به د خوبه پراته وو تیاره به راباندې راله څپلې به مو سر تېر شي سره په هوا کېدلو به ننوتلو به په کنجانو کې به درېدلو په تاخچو کې به پټېدلو
اسلامی جمهوریت به جمهور رئیس جناب اقبال حامد کرزی
The triumphant images in city settings were misleading. They were merely covering up another war being fought over power. The warlords had taken their places as a result of electoral fraud on a massive scale. Cronyism was rampant. Even parliament was a reflection of the country itself, divided.
It was a composition of warlords, drug lords, corrupt people, good people, technocrats, communists, left, right, middle of the road, all kinds of people, populists. Some crooks and criminals saw that. They said, oh, this will make us a lot of money. Some of us made a lot of money. Some of my colleagues, even in that parliament, made a lot of money. So corruption saw a window there. The political mafia was being created by the economic mafia.
Quick and easy money came from drugs. Banned by the Taliban, production now skyrocketed. The urban landscape in Kabul changed. In 2007, poppy palaces, examples of narco-architecture, started to spring up. In dark corners, drugs wreaked devastation. Afghanistan became the world's #1 producer of opium and heroin.
In the beginning, there was a kind of, how would you say it, a tolerance. I mean, those issues will be dealt with later. Let's put a rule of law in place, let's put a development in place, let's build a government capacity up, and the counter-narcotics will fall in place by itself nearly automatically. Now, that was a miscalculation. That's not how it works. I mean, those warlords, they extract rents from the most vulnerable, and they fight each other to get to those rents, to those profits, to those gains. That means that they are becoming part of the instability. The bulk of the narco profits is not going to the insurgents. 150 million for the insurgents, 1.85 billion. To whom?
These amounts were derisory compared to those poured into the country by the West. The young republic of the world's 5th poorest country was getting a massive shot in the arm, worth hundreds of billions of dollars, allotted to construction of roads, buildings, vocational training, supplies. The Afghan economy was a bubble. And a large part of this financing went straight back out of the country into the coffers of international companies and their subcontractors.
Vous pouvez avoir des sous-tables pour une attribution de marché que le ministre va toucher. Ce qui est beaucoup plus grave, c'est les 50% de ce contrat qui vont partir dans des sociétés qui ont des frais de gestion ou des frais d'administration qui sont tout à fait scandaleuses. Vous avez des gens qui ont dit, vous avez 100 à dépenser, dépensez-le rapidement parce qu'il faut nous montrer des résultats. Ils dépensaient 100 pour avoir 30 de résultats. Un petit barrage, une route, une école, et ces 30 leur suffisaient. Et puis bon, dans les rapports, on disait, voilà, on a dépensé 100 pour avoir ce résultat.
Stop blaming the Afghan capacity. It's poor planning, and donors were to be blamed for it. For example, a donor would spend or put in the budget $200 million for a project. They knew that it could be spent in 4 years, but dumping it all on the budget in the first year, because it's for some donors at the end of the day, showing back home, it's important to show how much money they dispersed.
Mais lorsque cette corruption a atteint le sommet de l'État, c'est là que les choses ont commencé à se dégrader sérieusement. Parce que lorsque les petits qui n'étaient pas vraiment corrompus réalisent que au sommet de l'échelle, la corruption est massive et on parle de sommes énormes, ils se sont dit, mais pourquoi pas nous dans ce cas-là? Et là, ça a gangréné tout le système et toute la pyramide.
While the Afghan government was losing all credibility, the Taliban were gaining ground. In their 30 years of existence, the Taliban strategy had not changed. In the early days, they made up for shortcomings of the state. Then, they won the people's support by restoring order and religious law.
Our Justice Department was very accurate, even from the cities where government was there. People used to come to us for their problems because they believe that the Emirates judiciary will solve our problems without bribe, without wanting money.
سبب کامیابی و پیروزی امارات هم اتفاق و اتحادشان بود و به کلانایشان اعتماد داشتند. این مسئله قدرت و منصب به امارات ارزش نداره. شما شاهد صحنه هستین، یک وزیر میارن ولسوال میکنه، کسی نمیگه چرا اینو ولسوال کرده.
مخکې اومدم ټول دغه سیاسي بحث کوم دا بیا ذبیح الله مجاهد سره راغلو چې ستاسو ولې دا جهاد شروع کړ په کوم هغه شروع کړ. الحمدلله د امارت مسؤلین یا د امارت مشرتابه چې دغه ټولو شیانو ته سره متوجه دي. مثلا د اسلام د اصولو یا د شریعت د اصولو مطابق څومره اصول چې دي که نه دلته په عملي کېږي او مثلا موږ ته د دوی له طرفه هدایت پکې راځي د هغې ټول عملي کولو کې موږ د پابند اوسو انشاءالله د شریعت او د اسلام د اصولو مطابق.
اونا کجای کار را کرده میتونستن؟ اونا یک حکومتای به صلاحیت و یک حکومتای دست نشانده بود، اختیارشان به دست دیگه مردم بود. اونا هیچ چیز عملی کرده نتونستن.
Fire to the west of the tree line!
2009 was a bloody year for NATO soldiers. 512 were killed and more than 2,000 wounded. In the United States, the White House was losing patience, waiting for the army to come up with a winning strategy. The man who personified the military, General McChrystal, wanted more soldiers.
General McChrystal, do you believe this is a winnable war in Afghanistan for ourselves and our Afghan allies?
Sure, I believe it is winnable, but I don't think it will be easily winnable.
The White House complied with the Army's demands. This moment will go down in history as that of the surge, with a huge military reinforcement.
And as Commander-in-Chief, I have determined that it is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America.
There's an American phrase that when all you have is a hammer, the military, every problem looks like a nail that you should apply the hammer to.
In 2010, 120,000 Western soldiers, 90,000 of them American, were deployed in Afghanistan. The new watchword was counter-insurgency, from a strategy devised by a French army officer during the Algerian War. It's an old mantra: win the support of the people with tanks and guns.
It's a mindset change to understand that the population is really the prize, that you're trying to gain their support while at the same time inflict damage on the enemy. You've got to raise the cost. You've got to make it costly for it to step out of the line and join the insurgents.
They increased their kill and capture nighttime raids, supposedly aimed at Taliban chiefs. The cemeteries and prisons filled up.
دلته ورونو می خاطی کولې هغه ورځم له خاطو څخه راغلی و اقتصاد له خو ډیر زوب ول دا منطقه خو ته معلومي ګوره شای نسته کې دلته او دلته ایلدارم و د کور کې نفوس مو زیات و نو واس مونږ رسیدای چې ورغلی وای چې غریبان و ډیر شي مونږ درلود اتی د شپې پاو کم یو بجاوه د یو ورور مې ووتی د باندې درې تیارې د غره په سر باندې کېنولې دا تیارې چې کېناستې دوی چې راپیاده سوه دلته نورې تیارې ګرځېدې د جنګي هغو بمبار شروع کړی د غره سر ته یې په څلورو نفر باندې نیولی وم ویې پښې مې ماتې وې دواړې په کشولې وخېځولم هلته یې څاڅ کړم ذاتي بیا راته یې وویل دوه درې نفره مالته وویسته یو نفر مو دلته وویستی په دغه کاته لاغم کې دا زوی مې بیا څلور ورځې پس پیدا سو له لغمه څخه یې راویستی
In the eastern and southern regions of Afghanistan, America reinforced its image as an occupying force. And the drone war, which was only just beginning, symbolized in the eyes of the people the occupiers' monopoly of illegitimate violence.
The Taliban had no air force, so it was safe for us. And so we relied heavily on air power, both manned aircraft, but also unmanned aircraft, drones. The challenge is that if you don't have contact on the ground and you don't well enough understand the local circumstances, you will make mistakes.
Okay. Okay, go and engage. Just be hunkering down.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, engage.
What's up? Nice. Secondaries.
Now it was droned, it was bombed, falsely bombed. My farmers getting killed in bombings, U.S. bombings.
Good. Fire. Very good. One more time. Quick. All right.
Okay, go and engage.
One farmer whose two sons, whose legs got amputated, blown up, property. I had a 50 jirib of pomegranates, which is all burned now, it's ashes. I had grapes, 50 jiribs, which is all burned. So economically and spiritually, mentally, yes, everybody, every tree, every leaf, the air, the birds, everybody got affected. I went to my village a few days ago. I thought like all the trees were crying, all the leaves, you know.
The villagers fled where they could, depending on military operations. Hundreds of thousands were uprooted in their own country.
دغه تکلیفونه را به وړه به پراته وګوله ډوډۍ به نه خاشه به نه وه چې په پخه به کومو مینانو به جړله رات ته خو د بل وطن و د بل ځای و په کلي کې لا نه پرېښولو ټکې اوبه یې لا نه راکولې چې پر سر یې د کومو مینان پورته کړي تکلیفونه یې ورکول هزاره ولو یې وهله بیا
دا خواڅ خنکه چې خانه تر بس وځه پرغه مش کوروته
دا سهار غرمه سي غرمه کې سي المره خجل ما نو کې رقم سي مګر چې تاریخ کې رښوا کې مو چې پر خپل ملاس نسي د نه پسنګي د لاسه نو خپل عملونه به مو نو خپل د څه خبر غلي ده څه خبر نو خدای په خبر دی نو
آل باز ناتو آمده که جنگ علیه تروریسم میکنه وام 10 سال است که گرم و گرم زران کندر است آخر گپ معلوم نیست والله بالله درد دارم و ترس دارم او مردم و ترس دارم که نشوا خدا نکرده که میرویس مجبور به خارج شوا و خارجی شوا نکنین به نیاز خدا.
This outcry from the Afghan president was an appeal to Barack Obama to rethink his strategy. For the first time, the White House was thinking about negotiating. But the American administration was split.
It became clear that the military solution that we were trying to put in place wasn't working. We needed to seek an alternative. But we had pushback from the Pentagon, from General Petraeus, and others who said it wasn't time to talk yet and that we needed to kill more Taliban and basically change the bargaining power between us before we would sit down with them.
The problem is that we never gained that dominant military position, right? During that surge, we largely denied ourselves. I believe we deluded ourselves to believe that there might be a military solution to this.
And the Taliban had this regenerative capacity, and they had sanctuary in Pakistan, so they could regenerate every year. There were more of them coming out, so we could continue to kill them, we could continue to fight them, but you know, they would keep coming back.
The Taliban brought guerrilla war into the urban environment. Kabul became inexorably more fortified. Foreigners locked themselves safely away. Anywhere, at any time, danger could be lurking. After 10 years in Afghanistan, the White House had reached a dead end. There was a record number of engagement and deaths in 2010 and 2011. No one could make sense of this war anymore, until May 2nd, 2011.
We're getting a closer look at the compound in Pakistan where Osama bin Laden was killed. ABC News obtained this exclusive video, purportedly taken inside the house where bin Laden was hiding. There's evidence of a bloody gunfight. The video shows bedrooms in disarray, blood on carpets, and items strewn about. The interior also appears
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. Justice has been done.
America's public enemy number one had been hiding in neighboring Pakistan. Barack Obama had been waiting for this moment since he first entered the White House.
We have turned a corner where we can begin to bring back some of our troops.
We had 100,000 American troops in Afghanistan. We had 40,000 additional NATO alliance troops. And this is the telling point. It was costing America, during those surge years, $120 billion a year. Per year.
The American president gave his administration 3 years so that the withdrawal would not look like a defeat. France was among the first of the Allied nations to pull its troops out of active combat.
Il n'y a pas ici qu'une présence symbolique. Nous voulons que la France reste en Afghanistan, différemment du passé, parce que nous avons accompli la mission.
Il se trouve qu'au cours des années, c'est essentiellement du côté américain que les décisions se prenaient. Et que l'Alliance, elle a révélé ce qu'on en savait, c'est-à-dire c'est une organisation dont les principaux responsables sont, pas forcément des Américains, mais sont, disons, très liés aux Américains.
Si aucune troupe combattante ne restera en Afghanistan à partir de janvier 2013, il y aura toujours des formateurs qui accompagneront les cadres de l'armée afghane et la police.
This was the solution for the military withdrawal. Have the Afghan security forces ready to take over in 2 years.
We expended enormous resources. I think the standard figure is something between $80 and $90 billion in building the Afghan security forces. We made several critical mistakes in doing that. One is that we built, to a large extent, an Afghan army that reflected our army. But it came so fast and it was so much that we squandered a lot of the money invested in the Afghan security forces. And finally, we poured a lot of resources into a system running from the Ministry of Defense down to the lowest private that reflected the endemic corruption of Afghan society.
"2013 marked the beginning of a carnage for civilians. 3,000 were killed that year alone. And just when they needed outside help more than ever, the roads became impassable and far too dangerous. Medical aid could not reach them.
La communauté humanitaire internationale ne voyageait que par avion. Certains de nos collègues afghans pouvaient avoir accès à certaines zones où il n'y avait pas de conflit, mais ça restait très compliqué. Ces populations, du coup, ont eu très peu accès et au développement et à l'aide humanitaire.
She said we don't know this searching blocking the boxes, breaking the windows and the doors. So what happened? If we know they were killing us, we would have everything here. Whenever they were grabbing the children,
در سر میز عملیات خانه ما حتما روز 5 نفر 10 نفر حتما بود که دکتر صاحبای جراحی ما بیچاره مصروف بودن کار اونا رو میکردن. خوشبختانه ما اون مریضایی را که قبلا دسترسی نداشتن و بسیار دلی میکردن یا در تأخیر یا موتر نبود یا جنگ بود یا هر موضوعی که بود سبب میشد.
ورور ما چې مړ سو پلار مو مړ سو دا یوه موره پاته وه موږ ډېر سرخوشحاله وو نو بس دا موږ ته یو غر غوندې وه بیا مین راباندې پټاو سو بیا هغه موټر کې زموږ یوه خور هم وه زما کوچنک بچی هم و زما مور هم وه نو بیا مې مور هغه زوی وفات وکړ شهیدان سوله 28 کسه نور پکې شهیدان سوله نو زه و زما خور خدای پاک بچ کړلو خو بیا موږ لس لږ سره زخمونه وه بیا د شپې 12 بجې وې څوک نه وه نه طالبان وه نه عسکر وه نه امبولانس و هېڅ شی نه و رش ځای باندې به و چې هلته به دوی انفجار وکړي یا بیا ځان مرګ پټاو کړي یا بیا موټرسایکل درولو چاچ کړی یا بیا موټر بم وکړي هغه کې به ډېر بې ګناه انسانان وژل کېدله چې هغه نه په حکومت کې لاس درلود نه په طالب کې
Il y a eu tellement de victimes civiles que la rancœur n'a fait qu'augmenter entre ruraux et citadins. Je réalisais quand même qu'à Kaboul, on vivait dans une bulle et qu'on était vraiment loin de la réalité des 3/4 de la population afghane.
Film میگیرن سویسته خوب شد
I'm very serious and beauty 10 سال میشه که ما به کابل آمدیم اینجا زندگی میکنیم به خاطر ادامه تحصیلات اینجا آمده بودیم فامیل ما یک فامیل معلم یا باسواد است مثل که پدرم شاعر است خواهرای من هر کدامش تحصیل کرده هستند و خوشبختانه فامیل شوهرم هم آدمای روشن فکر بود بعد از ازدواج ما به تحصیل ادامه دادیم یعنی من صاحب یک دختر بودم که با دانشگاه رفتم صاحب یک دختر بودم دخترم 6 ماه بود من شامل دانشگاه کاردان شدم در بخش حقوق و علوم سیاسی
But violence seeped into every part of Afghan society. In addition to poverty and terrorist attacks, there was a surge of crime. Violent crime exploded in all major Afghan cities.
Il y avait eu une montée des kidnappings. Ça m'a beaucoup inquiétée parce qu'on disait que personne n'était à l'abri, que même les femmes et les enfants étaient kidnappés. C'était aussi compliqué car c'était une période où beaucoup d'investisseurs privés venaient investir dans des usines, des ateliers, dans de la production, et ça a beaucoup ralenti justement cet élan-là.
با 1000 افغانی پول تو را قتل میکردن. 1000 افغانی اگر پیدا میکردن یا یک تلفنی نوکیای ساده 500 افغانیگی تو را وادار به مرگ میکردن که تلفن تبته و پول تبته، بعد از او خوشبخت میبودی که بدون از اینکه لط و کوبت کنن تو را رها میکردن. این خو همش از فقر میآید، همگیش از نبود وظیفه، نبود امکانات میآید. چون ما خو گفتیم مسلمان هستیم و دزدی در اسلام حرام کامل است. و یکی چرا خدمات راه نمیشد که اون نفر مجبور به دزدی کردن 1000 افغانی میشد دیگه، این جوابش باید حاکمان اونمو دوره بدن.
I think it's a unique opportunity where we focus on solving problems.
2014 saw the presidential election. The population had grown from 20 to 33 million. A new generation had come of age, middle class, urban and educated. The NATO generation which yearned for change.
ما جوان شدیم و از خواستگاه شهروندی خود برخواستیم و فکر کردیم که ما هم شهروند هستیم، میتونیم در رقم خوردن سیاست کشورمان رول بازی کنیم. یک رأی ما سرنوشت ساز است. ما از درون فامیل تشویق میشدیم که باید برای دادن بروین و پای صندوق های رأی بروین تا سرنوشت کشور شما به دست شما رقم بخوره.
Ashraf Ghani, the new president, was a technocrat. Educated in the United States, he wanted to reform the state. But his election was marred by fraud on an unprecedented scale. Ashraf Ghani's main opponent, Dr. Abdullah, refused to accept the result.
It required months of United States effort. I was spending a lot of time that summer in Afghanistan trying to help Ghani and Abdullah negotiate the outcome of those elections, and because neither side was willing to concede.
I'm here because President Obama and the United States of America are deeply interested in a unified, democratic, and stable Afghanistan. We obviously have high hopes that the questions about the election will be resolved quickly, can be resolved.
Ultimately, we forged, thanks to the efforts of Secretary John Kerry, a government of national unity that we hoped would be able to manage the country and keep this democratic experiment moving forward.
انتخابات نړۍ په وخندل د ریاست جمهوریت نه د کودکستان هغه جوړ کړله، لیکن موږ ګورو چې موږ څونه مخته ځو بیا راخویږو. لکه د یو مثال درکړم چې په غره خیږي چې واوره وي که 10 متره ځې 15 متره بیرته راخویږي. افغانستان هم دغه حالت کې دی اوس.
وقتی که ما فهمیدیم که دیگر رأی ما سرنوشت ساز نیست، حداقل شخصا خودم دیگر پای صندوق رأی نرفتم. ما امو مسئولیت به شانه خود نگرفتم، چون دیگه کسا سرنوشت کشوری مرا رقم می زدن، من دیگر رأی ندادم و ایره امروز من میگم خوشبخت هستم که انتخاب نکردم.
We knew, like, the presidents in our circle, none of them, their family didn't live here. They had no connection to this country, unfortunately. We all felt that these people will run away. Years ago, I said it's like two plain people who came from outside who are ruling the country, and these two planes would be ready before the country falls.
As we would find out later, the White House already knew that the military withdrawal would bring about the collapse of the Afghan state. So the Americans had changed their strategy and decided at last to negotiate with the Taliban. 4 years of discreet talks culminated in 2014 with the release of the only American soldier held by the Taliban.
There had been a package put together that was going to lead to opening the talks, which had a prisoner exchange element to it. 5 Taliban in Guantanamo and Boberg jail. This guy's been, in a cage for several years. Let's do it. So we negotiated it.
An important component of the negotiations was not simply about the swap of these 5 people for Boberg, but a test of the sincerity and the ability of the Taliban to deliver on commitments they made to us.
These negotiations weren't to everyone's liking. In 2014, the Islamic State established a presence in Afghanistan, bringing their off-the-scale violence with them from Iraq and Syria. They were as much the enemies of the Taliban as they were of the Americans.
The intelligence community said that they thought they were going to be a real threat. Now, they didn't say what scale. I mean, they didn't know, obviously. But they took it seriously once they appeared. And that became, I think, that gave them a rationale for revisiting Obama's decision to leave in 2016.
I can't see anything.
Barack Obama left power without having brought this war to an end. To make up for the withdrawal of troops, the American army increased the use of drones, piloted from a base in Nevada. 10 times as many strikes in 2 years. For every target killed, another 9 people died, Taliban or not. This terror from the sky only reinforced the convictions of a new generation of Afghans who joined the ranks of the Taliban.
پټ راغلم مور ډېره خفه وه زما ورور واټساپ بیا به ویډیو کال باندې غږېدو سره نو ویل چې ځان سره احتیاط کوه او پلار چې وي هغه به راته ویلې چې یعنې زه هم نه منې کوم لکه دا د ازادۍ جګړه ده او دا د اسلام جګړه ده نو که په دې لار کې تاسې ووژل شئ که تاسې مثلا بندیان شئ که تاسې زخمیان شئ دا باندې زه ویاړ او افتخار کوم.
I was ready to go and take AK-47 to fight, to make our country free. Then I was ordered that, no, here we have a lot of people with guns. We need you guys in the cities. And I became a lecturer at Kandahar University. Beside that, we were giving our message to our people, understanding them that who are foreigners, what they want to do, and whose country is it, and at the end of the day, who will stay.
د موږ خو اکثریت مسؤلیت د فرهنګي برخه کې موږ فعالیت کوو. مثلا ذهن جوړونه کې موږ دې کې شک نشته. په سوشل میډیا کې به موږ هغه کوو، فعالیت کوو. فیسبوک کې مثلا ما 2-3 پیجونه صفحې وي، په ټویټر کې وي، مثلا په انسټاګرام کې وو، حتی په ټیک ټاک کې وو، کلب هاوس کې به هم بحثونه کول. دا ټوله زموږ د هغه برخه وه.
These things didn't happen without a system. You know, had about 10 to 12 commissions, and every commission was like a ministry. At the end of the 2018 and 19, we have millions of income, you know, incomes, daily incomes. We have our customs were there. For every province, we have a governor. For every district, we have in charge.
Today, 4 years later, the Taliban government is out of the shadows. The fighters have replaced the policemen whom they formerly shot at. The Taliban staff have taken over the corridors of power. In these ministerial buildings in Kabul, some civil servants of the previous regime, like Aimal, have remained and they now work with the Taliban, who only yesterday were attacking them.
اوج رویداد اینجا در وزارت فواید عامه صورت گرفت. مهاجمان هر آن که را دیدند به گلوله بستند.
او ما دون از نږدې فرق پکې وکړه، لکه 15 متره فرق د موږ وس وش، د هغوی راننوتل او زه مخې ته ورته ولاړ او زه وتښتېدم او زه پکې بند سوم. تقریبا 8 ساعته زه په جنګ کې بند وم. دا د ما غټه خاطره ده چې تقریبا موږ 38 کاران چې نږدې همکاران وو پکې شهیدان شول، پکې د منځه لاړل.
The final years of the Republic were chaotic. Added to the Taliban's exponentially increasing offensive were the terrorist attacks of the Islamic State.
It was only in the end of 2018 when the Trump administration decided, you know what, we will sit with the Taliban. They only want to talk to us. They don't want to talk to President Ghani. So we will sit with them to see if we can come up with some sort of deal that will allow us to leave and ensure that our interests on counterterrorism and other things are met.
In early 2020, the Doha Accord was signed with the Taliban. For the Americans, it was a case of every man for himself. The Afghan Republic must now fend for itself, just like those who had believed the promise of Western development.
The U.S. strategy to deal with the Taliban, to engage with them, with leaving out the government, was a big setback. And the overall mood in the air was that U.S. has made a deal with Taliban, why are you fighting? You know, and this really caused a lot of morale issues.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. درزي څو کسه جته شمار کړي دربکان دی ورته وګوره دا ملي ورده تسلیمیږي د اسلامي په حالات کې دی الحمدلله.
These too are images we did not want to see. The Afghan army handing over their weapons.
Il y avait beaucoup de gens à Kaboul, et en particulier beaucoup d'Afghans qui ne voulaient pas y croire. Je pense que c'est ça le terme, ils ne voulaient pas y croire. Et donc il y avait une espèce de déni généralisé. Et puis quelque part, c'était aussi pour la communauté internationale une certaine forme d'échec.
نو ولې وخت نه تسلیمېده ځانونه مو داسې
خوش آمدید خوش آمدید خوش آمدید خوش آمدید خیر ببینید نه پیدا نکنید خوش آمدید هیچ گپ نیست هیچ گپ نیست هیچ گپ نیست هیچ مشکل نیست برو بخیر.
Today's headline, we are witnessing more cities in Afghanistan falling to the Taliban. 3 more provincial capitals and a local army headquarters in the country's northeast.
In recent days, the Taliban have captured huge chunks of territory, including many of the country's largest and most important cities.
Progression éclair en Afghanistan, un pas de plus vers la prise de pouvoir des talibans aux portes de Kaboul, les islamistes.
These cries of joy, we did not want to hear them either. To us, they sound like the enemy's cry of victory.
Le drapeau américain a été retiré de l'ambassade. Le président Ashraf Ghani a fui au Tadjikistan et déclaré les talibans ont gagné.
And yet, when the Taliban took over this presidential palace in August 2021, they held open a door to the possibility of peace after 40 years of war.
سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
و په زړه کې مې داسې خوشحالي وه چې خدای به مو خپل وطن را ازاده کړي خپل هدیرې ته به ولاړ شو موږ چې ژوندي دا به دا خپل هدیرې ته ولاړ شو دا زموږ مناسب به خوندي سي او عیال به هم په یې ګوله موړ شو خوشحاله وو موږ خدای به اسلامي کړي خدای به کراري کړي.
The Afghan Republic is dead. The Taliban have re-established their Islamic emirate on the rubble of our presence there. We left behind a country at standstill, a ruined land.
When we came here, all the funds of foreigners stopped, and nothing was here in our budget. Just numbers on the paper and names. So we it was like starting from zero.
چې دنیاوال خپل دا خبره کوي چې 1 میلیون خلک د وګړي سره د ولګي سره د مرګ سره مخ دي مطلب دغه چا کړي څوک یې مخ کوي ورسره خلکو یو غړپ اوبه یو لقمه ډوډۍ یو مړۍ ډوډۍ هم په قرار په امنیت کې نه وه خوړلې د اوښو سره د وینو سره یې ګډه خوړلې وه الحمدلله لله الحمد نن که یو مړۍ ډوډۍ خوري الحمدلله د امنیت په فضا کې خوري.
A bitter taste remains. The Taliban are back with their strict sense of law and order. Women are again veiled head to toe. But this does nothing to tackle the colossal task of repairing the wounds and deep divisions of the war.
طالبی که میای مستقر میشه باز عفوی عمومی اعلان میکنه میگه ما عفوی عمومی کرده یعنی ای که مردم افغانستان آیا این انتحاری را کرده بود مردم عادی مردم غیر نظامی در سرکا انتحاری میکرد اگر کسی که عفو عمومی باید اعلان کنه مردم افغانستان است.
بل ټول عمر چې موږ دغه سوي طالب مین پټ کړی دی، سړک یې خراب کړی، کلینیک یې وران کړی دی، نو زما هېڅ د دې سره علاقه نشته. موږ خو چې دې معنا کار وکړي، خدمت وکړي وطن ته، موږ خو بخښو، موږ کوم دغه نه ورسره لرو.
پیدا سوی یم په جنګ کې یم او کیدای شي مړ شم، کیدای شي ما کیدای شي پکې استفاده کړله. توقعات پکې شته، دا نه یو چې باید هغه اوس نه دا به جنګونه روان وي، خو مونږ هم په دې توقع لرو چې په مونږ باندې به هم رحم وسي.